Asset management is a broad category within finance that includes some of the most prestigious jobs and well-known companies in the world. This video is the ultimate beginner's guide to everything else you should know about asset management. First, we need to break down some of the different categories within this sector of finance. The first category, and this is a big one, is going to include pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. When people in financial media talk about institutional money or smart money or big money, often they're referring to these massive funds managed by states, municipalities, and sometimes entire countries. Because some of these entities are so large, the amount of money they manage or their assets under management is also very large. So if you were in a position working at a pension fund or a sovereign wealth fund, that would likely be the largest pool of assets that you could potentially ever manage in your life. They have a lot of money. Pension funds, since they pay monthly benefits out to retired employees, have a very strict set of liabilities that they need to immunize and make sure there's cash flow distributions available to be sent out. And they can have very strict rules around how the money in the fund needs to get invested. So sometimes they can be considered pretty plain vanilla investing. Some sovereign wealth funds will be similar, but others will give investment professionals much more leeway in where they want to allocate their dollars, so it could be a little more interesting. You also want to think about whose money you're helping grow, though, and if it was like some nation that has governmental practices you don't agree with, obviously you wouldn't want to work for that sovereign wealth fund. Next, you have wealth management, and if you've followed this channel before, you know that this is the sector within finance that I work in. There are many different business models that you could operate in if you're an employee in the wealth management sector. One is typically referred to as the independent channel, and in this channel, LPL is by far the most popular broker-dealer. There are many RIAs across the country that custody assets through LPL. LPL is great for their investment flexibility and the options that they provide advisors, but they're known for having a horrible technology offering that can make getting work done on your computer very difficult, which would be annoying. The most hands-off custodians are usually the online custodians, TD and Schwab being the biggest there. I also know of other RIAs that custody their clients' assets through TD or Schwab, or a combination of the two. And that's a really commoditized service in wealth management. The advisors almost get nothing for holding money in accounts through those two custodians. They're just providing the simple service of giving the clients a spot that they can park their dollars logistically. Then you have a couple of the branded independent broker-dealers. Common examples there are Raymond James or Ameriprise. There are thousands of financial advisors that work at both of these firms, and they can each have their own flavor of how wealth management has to work. So you want to know what that flavor is before deciding to get into enroll with either of those BDs. Finally, the broker-dealers that usually custody the largest amount of assets in the wealth management space would be the wirehouses, and there's a reason they usually have the most assets. Two examples of wirehouses are Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley. And yes, you might recognize those names as very large investment banks. They're known for getting huge business deals done and then getting the founders who sold their interests in those businesses, or the group of investors who generate a lot of cash from those deals, become their clients in their wealth management department, in which they will invest a lot of those people's money into like proprietary stocks that these wirehouses are also underwriting on the investment banking side. There can be some ethical issues there, but on the other hand, they can also sometimes be the most prestigious names in wealth management. So some financial advisors with the most AUM, if you look at national rankings, work at these wirehouses. The next category we'll talk about will be hedge funds, and then similarly, I'll talk about private equity funds. Hedge fund is probably the sexiest word on this list. Many people know that hedge fund managers are some of the highest paid individuals on the planet. Plus, you usually get a lot of flexibility in how you invest client dollars based on the fund strategy that you choose to work at. It can be a really cool place to be. Private equity funds can be similar, but they're usually a little bit more restrained in the types of investments that they'll make. Typically, they're only equity interest. There are niche categories like private equity real estate and private equity debt. You're usually looking to invest money into a small to medium-sized company, add a lot of value to it, and then sell it within 5 to 10 years to make a lot of money for your already rich investors. Finally, we have mutual fund management. That is when you're picking investments that get basketed into these mutual funds that are offered throughout brokerage accounts or 401k plans, especially in the entire country or world. Okay, let's get into ranking some of the firms that operate in these industries, or I'll at least point out the top 2 or 3 that you might want to know about if you're considering learning more about any of these sectors. Just because I already started talking about the wealth management sector and the firms that operated in it, I'm going to start there. You heard what I said about LPL being very popular, and you also heard what I said about the prestige of Merrill Lynch as a wirehouse broker-dealer. So I would probably place each of those two custodians as the top of the list in terms of popularity or prestige. They certainly have their drawbacks, as any company in any industry does, but for the most part, they have really good reputations and a lot of advisors utilize them to invest their clients' dollars. Hedge funds can be really niche. You could work at a hedge fund where there's 4 other people working there and have a great career. So the 2 names that I'll mention here are just maybe the most popular or well-known or prestigious hedge funds out there. Those are going to be Renaissance Technologies, founded by Jim Simon. That's notoriously a technical trading strategy. And then Bridgewater and Associates, founded by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio is maybe the most popular hedge fund YouTuber. Interestingly, there's also one hedge fund that I've heard talked about as sort of a secret society called Bridger Capital. Bridger Capital was made famous on the internet, at least, in a podcast on one of the hip hop radio stations with Martin Shkreli, where he talked about the secretive nature of that fund and how they almost don't even let anyone know that they exist. And he was really surprised when one of the talk show hosts, Charlemagne, knew about Bridger, and especially that he had visited the office. So I have no idea what goes on there, but maybe you check out that video and just see his reaction to the conversation. It was really odd. In private equity, some of the biggest names are Blackstone, KKR, or the Carlyle Group. I honestly don't know all that much about the differences between those first 2, but as a member of the general public, we do get a cool look into the Carlyle Group's operations, since one of their managing partners, I think he is, David Rubenstein, has a talk show where he sometimes mentions a lot of the operations going on there and some investment decisions that the fund might be making. Okay, so what do you actually do working in asset management? The answer to that question will differ wildly depending on which of these sectors that I've described you end up working in. The main common function, though, that almost any career in the asset management field within any of these categories is going to share is that your day-to-day activities will primarily be in supporting the investment decision-making process. By supporting, I mean pulling reports, doing research, running comparisons, building models in Excel, putting together presentations. You're generally not doing deals or making the final investment decisions unless you are at like the managing director or managing partner level within some of these firms, but almost every role within them does share the support of some type of investment decision-making activity. So if you're considering a career in asset management, you want to look at how money is actually invested in these different categories, what the end clients are in these different areas. So if you want to work for a certain state's pension fund to support retired firefighters from that state, being an analyst for that state's pension could be a cool gig. If you want to do some crazy derivative futures trading, you probably need to work at a hedge fund or maybe at a college endowment. The point is that depending on how you like investing money or what you find most interesting, you could find yourself a better fit within some of these sectors. It's really only in the wealth management sector that you'll be the end client facing person, because that's more of an entry-level position. Not the most entry-level, but it's closer to an entry-level position than in some of these other categories. So if you want to be sitting across the table from people talking day-to-day about investment recommendations, probably working in wealth management is a good option. The last couple categories here we're talking about are hours and compensation. How much do you have to work and how much are you going to get paid? Just like the day-to-day activities are drastically different, the amount of hours that you work in these different sectors and even within different firms in each sector is going to be very different. I did take a look at what the averages are between different roles. I looked at the reputations of some of the different firms on this list, and I've tried to get an average just for the sake of this video to give any of you viewers a ballpark on how much are these people actually working. I think we can get pretty close to saying that the median is going to be somewhere between 52 to 62 hours a week. So if I had to pick a number, it would be, on average, you're going to be working 56 hours a week. But of course, there's a wide range there. I was an intern at an RIA in the past, and some of the partners there worked about 12 hours a week during the summers. I also have good friends who went into investment banking after college or were interns between their 3rd and 4th years of college in investment banking, and they regularly worked 90-hour weeks with really busy weeks when deals were just about to close, working over 100 hours, which is no life at all. You just have to live at the office. Actually, I might argue that asset management is one sector within the finance industry, or one sector across our economy as a whole, where the amount of hours that someone would work can vary the most widely. So next, to look at how much money you'll make, there probably is some correlation between the amount of hours you work and your total comp, but not directly, because really it's just getting to the upper level management or partner or director roles within asset management to get yourself those huge bonuses. But in the first 5 years of your career, which is probably the main demographic for this YouTube video, I think it's fair to guess that the median income across all these sectors we've talked about is somewhere between 72 or 75,000 US dollars per year. Sure, there are pretty young people in private equity making 275K a year, and I also know that there are people working at mutual funds, making $48,000 a year. There's a range, but if we had to pick an average, I wouldn't say it's somewhere up around 90 or 100 grand. That's actually a really good position in asset management. Of course, there are gonna be tails, but the median, to give you a guess, would be like 72, 74K. So to conclude, is asset management right for you? It can be a really fun, rewarding career. You could find yourself solving complex problems that you have a lot of interest in and investing clients' dollars in a certain way that could benefit from how those problems get solved by companies out there. It can come with a lot of prestige depending on what sector you work in. You can make a lot of money or you can have very flexible hours. I really believe that the type of career you can build in asset management is totally catered to what you find interesting and what you value. If it's time, or if it's money, or if it's supporting a cause you care about, running the general fund investments for a nonprofit organization or something to that effect. If you focus your efforts right, you can really build the career that you want in this industry. And I think investing in capital markets is a good thing to do in general. They're always going to be there. Why not take advantage of them? If you have any other questions about your specific career goals, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to talk. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. The YouTube algorithm loves the long watch times. If you could also like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, I always appreciate those things as well. So as always, have a good one.